Now, this is a random question. Can there be wars that aren't fought politically? Like, that are fought for non-political reasons?
My gut tells me no, because I think even if the initial motivation, the initial reasoning not falling under the definition of politics, I think the act of war in and of itself is political, and that would then make any conflict political.
That's fair. Because, I was even thinking like just two families having war between each other. Yeah, that's
family politics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also metonym, but yeah, that's family politics.
I don't know what that means.
You should go listen to our podcast episode on metonymy.
I just nodded and pretended I knew what we were talking about.
I mean, there's a famous quote by a Prussian military theorist who said that war is a continuation of politics by other means. These are continuous. When politics breaks down, war happens. And then Michel Foucault flipped that around and made a very compelling argument that actually politics is a continuation of war by other means. Or he at least proposed this as part of a conversation about like what really defines politics.
Foucault.
Mickey Fuck, author of The History of Sexuality and Discipline and Punish.
CEO of sex.
Dictionary definition of politics is distribution of power in society. What does it mean to say that something is political?
I think I view politics in the traditional sense. I think of politics as the actions or words of politicians. I don't typically, I guess before this conversation, think of things outside of the conventional realm to be political.
I would say deliberate actions to get outcomes, like specifically socially.
So context-based.
It's very
so context-based.
There's like social politics that people do, because I was going to say something about like making rules or things, but that's not it. Social politics are just you actively choosing to do certain things.
Well, I mean, and even when I describe situations, like if there's a complex issue between two people or a group of people, I consider that to be politics. Like if there's an argument in a band, the easiest way to summarize that is I'll say, it's band politics.
I think it's also like a very interactive word too, and it's very socially based. I think especially the way that we talk about politics now, even when we use it, when we refer to any smaller system politics, workplace politics, like social politics, just discourse politics, we talk about that a lot. And I think what we mean by that is a sort of intentional methodological approach to deciding things about society, about the world, about whatever we are referring to. It's like a decision-making process.
Yeah.
Politics is manipulation.
I think in a lot of ways that is true.
I'm about to politic my bass on this solo.
I mean, language is manipulation and communication. And that's kind of what it says to say that language is inherently political, is that all communication has a persuasive element to it. You don't say something unless you're trying to get a result.
He says persuasively.
Yes.
Even if you're just alone, you stub your toe, you say fuck, you say that to let off steam. You're trying to persuade yourself. So there's no escaping the rhetorical dimension of communication. At the same time, anytime you're dealing with someone else, there's no escaping the politics of how is this interaction either enacting an existing distribution of power or redistributing power in some way.
Yeah. Discourse is also always implied when you talk about politics.
Yeah.
Discourse in some way, in some facet, every time you talk about politics in any context, you are usually referring to some sort of discourse.
Yeah, my brain automatically defaults to discourse anytime I'm thinking of politics.
That's at least the connotation, right? Sort of baked into the premise of whatever it is you're talking about where you're going to use the word politics.
So you've got your political system, and it is self-contained. It speaks its own language, and that's voting. We vote for leaders. The leaders vote for bills, and that's the language of politics. To compare, we can say there's a language of economics, of finance, and that's money circulating. There's the argument that, we need to get money out of politics. which is kind of a nonsense argument because any sort of bribe, it's contingent on something that's not part of the system, that's outside the system. Case of a prisoner bribing their jailer, who really has control there? It's not the person with the money, the person who doesn't have the money, who has the political power. But extending this to music, I think it's safe to say music is a separate system from politics. The music on the radio does not have a linear correlation with what bills are being passed, with who's in office. What we want to look for is structural couplings. In politics and finance, that would be the politician and their own financial interest and their ability to vote, yes or no. So that's a structural coupling. Without that specific situation, there is no interface between finance and politics. What are the structural couplings? What are the mechanisms by which music changes politics?
The ability to move people. But in the actual practical way, I mean, the money of political bribes or anything like that is people's will for something to be done. So if no one's thinking about anything, like, yeah, you have to get elected to do certain things. And music has influence over thoughts to an extent, or to feelings.
Yeah.
And feelings are important for politics. Because pretty much most decisions are made off feelings, not logic.
I'll bring one thing in. First of all, I have a question. You're speaking contemporarily, right? Because I think that right now we're also at a unique standpoint where music, like a lot of, at least the most widely listened to music, right, that gets your biggest audience, the radio, a lot of that is sort of centralized in Los Angeles. And the White House in Los Angeles are very oppositional of each other, just in general. So there's just this push more now than ever before to just not let music sway your politics, if that makes any sense.
A celebrity shouldn't have political opinions.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm open to historical examples as well. I will go and get this out of the way because we talked about this on the 3rd or 4th episode of the podcast way back last year. The politics of punk music and of hip hop, it's not in the messages they have. It's not in the fact that they're rallying people for a cause. It's in the fact that it is actually changing production practices. That it is not like inspiring people, but actually giving power to the people to take control of the means of production.
808s, man.
Yeah.
So this is a historical example that I think we can read into for ideas for how to approach this nowadays. Because like you said, Los Angeles, the centers of music production, there's actually deliberate pushes against having those be influential in politics. And so I think more than ever, we need to think about the micropolitics, the day-to-day actions that people can take that aren't like advocacy, that aren't institutional changes, but that are more like practical, everyday, how do we redistribute power?
Okay, so these are legal civic engagements.
Or illegal.
Or illegal civic engagements, but not an institutional change. Something that changes within define your barriers more clearly here.
What I meant by institution in that moment, I don't have a nuanced definition of institution, a hierarchical organization that may or may not be intended to interface with the government, but that's kind of the idea of institutional activism is, okay, we need to put together a formalized organization that's going to fight for our rights within existing channels of in any top-down approach to organization. I would call that institutional approach. Yeah, the Los Angeles music industry, that's an institution. There's got overlap with like the Nashville industry and the Atlanta industry.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear that I couldn't use the Underground Railroad spirituals as an example. But, you know, contemporarily, I think that the intention of music listening, music production, and all things involving music has changed, and it's diversified. And it's not as much of a in-group artist's niche or something that we all understand and enjoy at such a surface level as much as it used to be. Now it's definitely a lot more capitalized. This
is the thing that I think everyone is conscious of and no one can do anything about. The mechanisms of capture are a little more diversified. Inevitably, no matter how good your music is at rallying people, it's going to be even better at making money.
Right.
All my homies share music through either Google Drives or just text it to the person. Just make a text chain where everybody sends their tracks and you can just swipe through and listen to all, like basically your radio station at that point.
I just go around to music venues and airdrop people my mixtape.
That's how I do it.
Generating cultural reliance on Apple products.
Yeah.
Yeah, this could be just like algorithm and social media bullshit because, once again, we live not in an era where people don't have enough information, but where we have so much information that half of it's fake. And there's no way to know unless you're willing to devote 15 minutes out of your day to each of the 3,000 things you learn.
And it's all stressful, and we have adapted ways to not be as harmed by the information.
I'm also at a point where I don't assume anything is real when I see it. First thoughts are, this isn't true. And then it goes to true. But that's also partially because a lot of my feed is taken up by Onion articles. So it's not even a conscious decision.
There is that. Yeah.
I think it's healthy to like see something and then do research before forming an opinion.
There's so many things I've seen people repost that literally like the next day gets shown to be very not true. Mm-hmm. But like I saw everybody share it.
Yeah.
It happens so often. And then I just think you're stupid for sharing it. And like, then nothing else you share I'm going to pay attention to because you lost your credibility.
Especially because like this was Trump's actual strategy, especially in his first month in office, is to just like do so much shit that most of it didn't get passed, but people were worked up about everything. So the stuff that was important to him did get passed because nobody knew what to actually challenge and call their legislators about.
Yeah, if you can get a headline like Trump renames the Gulf of Mexico, then you can do everything during that news cycle.
Yeah.
A lot of his strategy too was like to overwhelm people and, just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. And like you said, a lot of people will get distracted or fatigued of like, oh shit, I've already talked about 36 things that he's already done this month. So then at some point people just quit talking about it and he actually gets to do the things that he wants to do.
Right. And I mean, very classic authoritarian regimes oftentimes start with just like a sweep of tough, harsh action. And what that does is it stuns people into oftentimes stagnance. But I think like in our common days now, it's just mostly to quick dopamine releases. We post about it and then try not to ever think about it again.
Yep.
What's the phenomenon with, it's like well documented in people with ADHD, but more broadly relates to attention, where talking about something makes you actually less likely to do something about it
my
because
favorite
you get
hobby.
the dopamine release from
your reward chemical activation.
Didn't you say that to me today?
Yes.
Downstairs, yeah.
Well, I wish there was a word for this sort of lightning fast militant strategy to overwhelm the opponent.
I think there is.
I think
not
it
sure.
starts with the B.
No, that's the
Bit. Sorry.
It's on the tip of my tongue.
blush. I'm going to need to turn on my favorite Ramones song to think on this one.
The Berlin Bop?
Yeah. Something like that. The kids needs bop. Fix need. Thick need.
Alli, you brought this up before we were rolling. How much does protest music pacify people and make them think that they are being politically active and actually render them politically neutral, politically nullified?
Yeah. Well, I think I asked that question because, first of all, I was just thinking of the Vietnam era and peace music movement. And a lot of that was also just positive psychology, as we talked about, right? This is very popular. This is the popular form of therapy, was humanistic therapy. And it was literally just think positive thoughts, try to think of peace, and that should make you feel peace. And so then when you heard songs that were just like, have peace, everybody was like, yeah, peace. Now, if somebody writes a song that's like, be peaceful, I would like want to kill somebody, right? Like definitely the psychology movement has changed since then. But also, as we talked about before, dopamine reward chemicals. Like this has become something that mimics civic engagement for us is just listening to something and then feeling something from it and then not doing anything.
Or writing something. I will admit, I keep up with events. I don't do shit. I write about it.
I argue at a coffee shop.
Yeah. It's a sort of catharsis.
In a lot of ways, I do think that protest music does pacify people. I've kind of felt like that for a while. Like, so many people listening to the protest music, that ends up being the extent of what they do. They believe that supporting the artist who's saying this message is the extent of whatever cause that they're allegedly supporting. Like, a lot of people will listen to Rage Against the Machine and agree with the things that they're saying, but then that's the end of it. Like, they're not going to try to change any of the stuff that's being talked about by Rage Against the Machine. They listen to it and agree and move on with their day.
Right. It's also hard to draw any like actual causative correlation between like listening to music and not doing anything, right? I also don't think that we can yet say, like, that's why I'm kind of just speculating. I'm throwing a whole bunch of stuff out there, but I think it's too early to say whether or not music, even right now, is not causing some sort of collective action in some way. Even if it's not as direct as, I heard this song and now I want to go do something about this subject, it still adds tools to our mental toolbox. And I think some of us have acted in ways or engaged with people in ways that they might not have had they not had certain perspective enlightenments from the music and media that they consume. I'll say that like a lot of my personality has developed through watching Family Guy, just developmentally. Or, right, I mean, just the media we consume does impact how we interact with the world in a lot of ways, even if it's not as directly as this song makes me want to overthrow the government, so I'm going to go do just that.
But I also think that you have to have a certain personality type to be affected by media like that. Like, I think there's a lot of people, you know, on both sides of the aisle of the political spectrum. You know, if a hard Republican hears Rage Against the Machine, I don't think they're really going to have their mind changed in the same way that, like, if a liberal hears Tom McDonald talking about whatever the fuck he talks about, you know, it's really not going to, like, you know, push the needle too much. Like, I think you have to be predisposed to that already and kind of have those seeds of whatever sowed in your mind.
Yeah, the two forms of political comments or things, persuasion, that I've noticed are there's the ones actually trying to change people with opposite opinions and the stuff trying to like solidify people who already kind of agree with you. And that's like where a lot of issues I feel also comes in political discourse is things that make like slogans that make you feel good and solidify your people often do the opposite of help change the minds of people who you're trying to change the minds of.
Yeah.
But people keep doing it because it feels good to them. This makes me feel good, so I'm going to keep chanting it so that despite those people, and the end goal is to make those people agree with you, is it not? Like, so it's just very selfish, like, cycle that happens.
It feels good to talk like you're on a Reddit forum with people that just agree with you sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we all do that, right? But yeah, where the motive is to persuade, I think that, like, back to what we talked about, like, what makes a good political song is knowing your audience and knowing what you want from that audience and knowing how to ask for it, right? When you have country singers that have a predominantly Republican audience and they are very liberal, right? And the ones that are like not very openly and aggressively left-wing, or those that are more silent about their politics, oftentimes have more sway, especially when they communicate using politics that are not partisanal. Mm-hmm. And just being mindful, like attacking an issue at a time rather than trying to establish a whole bunch of different bullet points of a party that you don't like. It's pretty clear that the show is about us if you're describing every single feature of somebody. Whereas if you go after one political trait or one political ideation at a time, you might get better.
Yeah, people are able to make like small compromises of like, and even keep you listening to them. Because if someone just is talking about, one topic, it's easier for you to be like, okay, I don't really agree with that side of politics, but I mean, on this one topic, it's okay. And then slowly ease into other things.